Hi, thank you. As he said, my name is Paul Verbeek-Mast, and I live in the Netherlands, which is just over there, very small in comparison to Russia. And I work in Amsterdam at Booking.com, where I am a front-end developer. So for me, it's a little bit awkward to be here as a project manager, but okay, it's good. I also organize conferences like this one, but then in Amsterdam, I'm one of the organizers of the Frontiers Conference, which is a front-end development conference. And before we start off, I want to say some boring legal notice that I have to say that all A/B tests and data shown in this presentation are not based on real experiments. So my talk is called Bad Evidence, and it's going to be a little bit about how we do A/B testing at Booking.com and all the pitfalls of A/B testing. So at Booking.com we have about 1,000 developers and designers working every day on our website and our other products, but mainly on our main website. And all those developers and those designers have full control over the things that they want to implement. So if they want to make a change, they can do it. And if they have an idea, they can do whatever they want with it. But one thing is that you don't want every change to be on the website, because otherwise everybody would just make it a pretty website instead. And you don't want that. So what we do with that is we run A/B tests. We make sure that everything that we do is completely validated, and once we know it's a good change, then we will put it on our production website. So let me explain real quick about what A/B testing is. So say you have this search box, and this is our version A. This is what we call base. And we want to change everything. We think, well, you know what? When we change it to pink, it will probably be working a lot better. So we make a pink version of it, and we call it a variant, which is our B version in A/B. And we develop those things, and we will put it on our production website, and we'll let it run for a while. And some people are coming, and all those people, we are randomly directing them to either the base or the variant version. And the random is very important because you don't want any bias in who's going to what. So if there is, you don't want to do first base, then variant, then base, then variant. You just want to kind of flip a coin and see which one goes where. And then we look at the data. So in this case, let's say that in base there were about 5,000 searches, and in variants there were about 6,000 searches, which is a great increase of almost 20%. So we will put this version on our website as the new, very pretty pink search box. That's kind of the idea of A/B testing. But something in this experiment went wrong. So let's look at it again. We have a base and a variant. But what did we actually want to change? We said that making the search box pink will result into more searches. So we make the search box pink, and yes, there were more searches. But is that good? Is that bad? So say, for example, that the searches increased, but maybe the bookings decreased with 4.7%. It could be a lot of reasons. Maybe people try to get away from that ugly pink search box and got to the next page and thought, oh, I don't want to book here. So yeah, there could be a lot of reasons why this wouldn't be working. So we said that making the search box pink will result into more searches. So why did we think that? Was it just a random guess? And more searches, why did we think that was a good change? There's a lot of questions with this hypothesis. I like the little animations in Keynote, in case you haven't noticed. So there's a lot of things going wrong here. But before I will answer this question, and this will be the rest of my talk, is answering the question what went wrong here, I want to take you a little bit on a story. So say you're at home, you're sitting on the couch, and you're watching a television show, probably a crime series like CSI or Criminal Minds or something like that, and you're looking at the show, and someone has been murdered, which will always happen. And you halfway through the show, you think, okay, I know who did it. I really know who did it because this person, he had a grudge against about the one that's being murdered, and he was always around. It must be the butler. It's also always the butler, so why not this time? And the rest of the show, you're just going to focus on this theory that you have. You're going to focus on that it's going to be the butler. So then you notice, well, the fingerprints were on the candlestick, which was the murder weapon, and he even sleeps next to the victim. So it could be right. It's you're trying to build your case and build your case. So instead of looking at the rest, which was that there was also a killer clown on the loose, which tried to murder everyone in the entire village. So instead of focusing on this part, you're just going to focus on something that supported your hypothesis, and you ignored everything else. Because it's not always never the same person that you thought it was in the beginning. Now this is very simple. This is about a TV show, which is trying to lead you into that direction. But in real crime investigation, it also happens. It doesn't just happen to you and me, it happens to cops, it happens to everyone. So I want to let you listen to a podcast called Serial. And Serial is about a real thing that happened. It was a murder of a girl called Hae Min Lee and a boy called Anand Syed who was being convicted for that murder. And the host of this podcast, she thought something wasn't right here, so she started to investigate it a little bit more. And in this clip that I wanted to show you is the host is talking to a criminal investigator she know, and she's going to talk about some evidence that went wrong, and he's going to tell you why it could have gone wrong. So, oh, sorry, does the sound work? Shall I try again?
I think that you hit on one of the biggest problems.
No?
I think that you hit on one of the biggest problems.
That will work.
Maybe we could put the microphone.
Yeah. Shall I try that?
What's the speaker? One of the biggest problems
I don't know.
that we have with the way that we interview and interrogate here, and the fact that we have an excellent witness. And we got somebody who's given us the whole case right here. He's broke it wide open for us.
Right.
We don't want to ruin him. We don't. And so, how much do you want to push? How much do you want to create quote unquote bad evidence?
But like, there's no such thing. Like this is
an actual term. It's called bad evidence. Right. You don't want to do something if it's going to go against your theory of the case.
But then I don't get that. I mean, that's like my father used to always say, all facts are friendly. Like, shouldn't that be more true for a cop than for anyone else? Like, you can't pick and choose.
Rather than trying to get to the truth, what you're trying to do is build your case and make it the strongest case possible.
But how can it be a strong case, and how can he be a great witness if there's stuff that's not true or unexplained?
And the comeback is that there's always going to be things that are unexplainable. But like I said, also remember, verification bias is kicking in here as well. I want to believe you, because you're my witness and I think this is what happened and all that. So the fact that you're giving me something that's inconsistent, that doesn't fit my theory of the case, what does verification bias cause you to do? Ignore it and push it aside. And that's what they're doing here with these inconsistencies. They're kind of pushing them aside.
Okay. So let me recap a little bit what happened here. So this criminal investigator, he's called Jim Trainum. He said what these police officers did, that they had a very good witness for the case that they were trying to build, and they didn't want to ask him any questions about things that might have go against the theory they have. So they didn't want to create this bad evidence that they have. So they weren't looking any further than they actually had to. And then when they did get some evidence that went against the theory of their case, the verification bias kicked in, is what it's called. They actually kind of said, well, this is probably, he probably remembered it wrong. It didn't happen like that, so let's just ignore this. So they were only focusing on things that were actually happening. So this is happening quite a lot, and this is just one of the examples. It's not only happening in police criminal investigation. It also happens in medical research, for example. So how can we avoid this problem? Well, first off, what you have to do is you have to create a solid hypothesis. You have to create something that you think, okay, just going to focus on this thing, and it has to be strong. It has to make sense. So here we would say, because of why, so the reason, we believe that changing what for who will result into outcome. If you have that, then you have a pretty strong let's I'll wait a little bit for the people taking a picture. Okay, so why? So let's start with the why. So the why should always be objective and based on data. So it shouldn't be because of a gut feeling you have. So if you have a gut feeling, it's not really objective, and it's also not based on data. It's because I like it better, also not really objective, or because I saw this on another website, which could be good, but if some other website does it, doesn't mean that it will work for you. Well, something that's better is because of research described in a specific article. If someone did create something for another website, they wrote an article about it saying why this happened, how it happened for them, and research behind it, then you can say, oh, in that case, then it could work for our website. Or you've done some own user research. You asked all your customers, and they said, well, we do like if the search box wouldn't be that yellow. So, and I really like pink. So you could check it out. Or based on the previous experiment that you did. So maybe you already did something, you got some data from it. Maybe the first experiment was successful, maybe it was not, but at least you got some data. So you can base it on that as well. And then you should look at the what. So the what is a short but accurate description of your change. So that example is, for example, changing it to pink. It's short, but it's not really accurate, because what are you changing to pink? And what part of that thing are you changing to pink? But it can also be too accurate, like changing the title that is on the top of the first block of the homepage to 16 pixels. It's too accurate. It's something, it doesn't really make sense that you think that this is going to happen. If you say decreasing the size or changing the color of the title or something like that, makes more sense. So good examples could be changing the background of the search box to pink. That's a little bit better. You know what's going to happen. If you are going to read this hypothesis in 6 months, then you still know what you tried to do here. Or opening pictures in the search page in the lightbox when clicking on it is a little bit less short, but at least you know what you tried to do. Then the who. So for who are you going to change this? And it should be a realistic, also accurate description of your target group. So everyone is not realistic. If you make a change, it's rarely going to be for everyone, and I will explain in a bit why. And if you say for users booking a hotel in Novosibirsk named Paul in Amsterdam with a big beard, not very realistic. You're probably not going to have a lot of users like that. So try to get a good, realistic target group as well. So maybe instead of everyone, you could say users visiting the homepage, because you're going to change something somewhere. So it's, in this case, everyone that's on the homepage. Or users searching a property in Novosibirsk. It's a little bit shorter. You have a bigger group. Or just all users that are logged in. So it's more realistic in this way. And finally, we have the outcome, which are measurable and expected changes. So some things aren't measurable, like users feeling better, or the site looking prettier. Or as what I see very often is an increase in loyalty. Many people say, well, you can measure that, you can measure loyalty, but what part of loyalty are you trying to measure? So what you can say is an increase in earnings, or a decrease in returned products, or an increase in signups. An increase in signups is something about loyalty. You could also say an increase of returning visitors is also a sign of loyalty. But whatever you're changing is probably not going to change all different kind of loyalty metrics. So looking back at our first example, so because of why? Because of user research. Say that we don't do user research about the color pink, about how many people like that instead of the orange one. We believe that changing the background of search box to pink for users that visit the homepage will result into an increase in bookings. So why is this better than what we had before? Well, first off, apparently we did research. So we didn't really know why we were doing something in the first place, but now we know we have done some user research, or we have read an article or something else. And because of the user research, we also thought it through what we want to change. It wasn't searches that we want to change, because searches doesn't do a lot. What we want to change is an increase in bookings. So these two are very important. The other ones are also important if you ever want to reread, or if you want to know who you are changing. So for example, if you have users that visit the homepage and your tool that you're using sees that, okay, this change is happening on the search page, then you're doing something wrong. But there's a catch with all A/B tests, any tests that have a hypothesis, is that you can never be 100% confident that the test that you did is correct. So the data that is returned doesn't have to be correct. Basically, it's depending on a whole bunch of things, and I will tell you a little bit later. But one of them is also that the more things. So because of it's not 100% correct always, the more things that you measure, the higher the chance is that some of them are just incorrect. So say that you have a confidence that your tests are correct for 90% of the times. Then if you're looking at 10 different things, then you can be fairly certain that one of them is incorrect. So what kind of things am I talking about? Well, lots of things you can measure on a website. You can measure the users going to search results. You can measure the visits on the page, or you can measure the logins, or maybe bookings from Malaysia, something very specific, but which is sometimes also very important. But and all those different things, they all have different metrics. It's rarely that it's exactly zero, because say that you're measuring it on 2,000 people, then version A might have 200 people going to search results, while the other one has 202 people going to the search results. It won't be accurate. Won't be extremely accurate, but what's happening. So let's see just the big changes, which are also a lot. So hovering over a button, or people changing the language. So what do we do here? Well, in our hypothesis, we said we want to change the bookings. So we always ignore the rest. Just look at the bookings. The other data is important, but it's only important if you ever want to base a new hypothesis on that data. But the hypothesis that you were saying were the number of bookings. And then you should also include some things that you always want to look at. Some things that might affect your business, and that's what we call health metrics. So in case of Booking.com, it could be calls to customer service and the price of booking. So if the calls to customer service so say your bookings go up by 20%, but your calls to customer service go up by 400%, then you should really reconsider putting that on production. So use the health metrics to see if something is not going negative there, but only use your defined metrics to see if your experiment is successful. And then also, be honest with yourself. So you can always change your hypothesis halfway through an experiment. It's what people sometimes do. They look at the data halfway through and they think, oh yeah, I didn't really think of that, so I will change the hypothesis so it could be more correct. No, you shouldn't do that. You should just be honest with yourself. Your first hypothesis was the thing that you wanted to measure. So don't go changing that. If you want to change your hypothesis, stop your experiment, do your research again, change your hypothesis, and start your experiment again. And also, there are some other things that you have to watch out for. So things are already said, metrics or change or data that is not in your hypothesis. This one is very important because a lot of people still look at that, but it can go in two different ways. You can, for example, if you kind of look at the average price, you can say, oh, the average price is going up, so it must be doing well, and the bookings were pretty average, so let's just put this on production anyway. And the other way around, you can say, oh, okay, so we have this bookings that go slightly up, and the price is going down. So this price could be a false negative. Maybe it's something that isn't actually happening. It was one of the 10 things that we were measuring that is incorrect. So just ignore the metrics that are ignore the metrics that are not in your hypothesis. Something else that I often see happening is we implement a new metric. Say we want to implement people booking an apartment. And then we haven't really tested it through. So if we're going to base something on a metric that we haven't really tested it yet, how can we know for certain that this is going to work? Well, your reaction to this thing could go also in two different ways. So you can say, hey, this new metric is positive, so it must be working great. And then if the metric is going negative, you'll probably say, well, yeah, it must be having a bug or something. So let's focus on the rest. So those metrics should be tested. If you implement something new, it should be tested in different scenarios before you're actually going to use it. And if you're going to use it, don't base on how well it's performing, but don't base it on the data you get. And then there's sample size. So sample size is how many people are you going to look at, or how long are you going to look at an experiment. You can say, it's positive after 5 days, so let's put it in production. Or you could say, it's negative after 5 days, so let's run it for a few other days. So before you start your experiment, know how long you're going to run this thing, or for how many users you're going to run it, and then just stop when the time is up. Don't say, well, it's still a little bit, it didn't really change a lot, so let's run it for a little bit longer, see if it's changing more. No, you know that 6,000 users were enough, so stop it. Because if you're going to run it for longer, then the chances are that you're just going to stop it whenever it says that it's positive. And how are you certain that this is not a false positive? That is not one of those 10% that is false? And speaking about that, so how do you decide how long you should run your experiments? You have to base it on the number of visitors you have, a number of people that see your change. So the higher the number of visitors, the shorter you have to run it. Also, how big of a change you want to measure. So if you want to see a change of 10%, or if you want to see a change of 0.1%, then it's also very dependent on how long you run it. So the bigger the change, the longer you have to run it. And how confident do you want to be that your test is correct? So if you want, there's a lot of tools out there to measure your to think of sorry. There are a lot of tools out there that you can use to measure the confidence. It's called G-test tools. So you just put in the number of visitors, the big of the change you want to measure, and then it will say to you, okay, if you run it for 2 weeks, then you are probably this confident, 99% or 98% or or 90%, something like that. So just wrapping it up a little bit. So what did we learn about this? The things that are really important is, first of all, create a solid hypothesis and stick to it. So create something that's good, that you know is the thing that you want to measure, and don't change it. Always stick to your hypothesis. And make your decision based on data. Don't make it on any feelings that you have. I know that you probably put in a lot of hours making this change. You've done a lot of research, and you think, okay, this is really going to work. And then it turns out that it didn't work. Well, that sucks. But at Booking.com, 9 out of 10 things that we make don't work. So just think of that. And you can just reiterate on it, make a slight different change, and then try it again. And also, there's no such thing as bad evidence. It's just a bad hypothesis. So always look at the data in your hypothesis, and you'll be fine. So instead of building a case, you have to try to find the truth instead. Because the truth is out there. Which is, when I made this slide, I've thought of something interesting, because for those who have seen X-Files, Mulder is always using data, and Scully is never using data. She's always basing on her feelings, while Mulder says, well, I see it, so it must be there. So, thank you. My name.
Вопросы? О, как много рук. Так, держи, ты первый.
You told about metrics that can use, and for example, how can we exclude false correlations? So why we must, how we can understand that bookings increase because of change of color, or not just because it's season, or something?
It shouldn't be. It couldn't be based on season, because you're running an A/B test in one time, so you're always getting one person to A or one person to B. Or you mean, so say it's spring, so people like the color pink better?
Yeah. Or other example, you just released to all one feature, and you're testing other. How can you understand that not this first just released feature, but that what you're testing is giving you increase?
Okay, so if you're releasing a little bit, if you're doing your A/B tests and you're A/B testing everything, then it couldn't be the other feature. So say that you're running 2 A/B tests at the same time, then one half who's going to the version A of your first experiment will go to version A of your second experiment, and one half who's going to version A of your first experiment will go to version B of your experiment. So you have a sort of tree going up. So if you're running your A/B test and really just track the right users and see which experiments they are in, you know for sure that it's happening, well, almost for sure that it's happening on your experiment.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, my name is Vasily. Thank you for your speech. Well, I've heard some similar thoughts from you, similar to ideas of our Russian fund called Free. And they call the same technique HADI. It contains 4 steps and hypothesis, action, data, and intention. So, and they thought that making these cycles every time during your development or checks could bring more ideas into your product. And what's your intention about the theory, and how many theories or hypotheses you check? I don't know, weekly or monthly?
So I thought I couldn't tell you about this, but this morning I saw a blog post from some of my colleagues that says that we on average have about 1,900 experiments running. So, and you can say an average experiment runs from 1 week to 2 months. So we have a lot of what's the hypotheses? Yeah. Okay. We have a lot of those, and so because everyone, all the developers can create their own experiments, can create their own things, and we have a lot of developers. For example, I sometimes create 4 new experiments on one day, so you can have a lot of those running at the same time. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Now here.
Oh, there.
Hello.
Hi.
So, you started with that every developer in Booking can suggest something. So, do you have any like internal screening of these suggestions, or you just test everything like this?
So we each work. We have about 75 different teams at Booking.com, and all those teams focus on a specific area or a specific problem. And we just, if a developer has an idea, he talks about it in his team, which is about 4 to 6 people, and if they all agree, okay, this is something that we can try, they can just do it. There's no one else who's, we don't...
Yeah, so before this process, you have some kind of gut feeling, filtering of the suggestions, right?
Well, basically, we don't do the gut feelings. That's what we hope. Some people still do. It happens sometimes, but they still run the experiments. I've seen hypotheses that says based on my gut feeling, and I think that's not good. But yeah, if someone is running an experiment just based on that, and it's positive, then it can still go onto production.
Okay, so you kind of still allow this.
We try to avoid it. We try to tell people when they're doing something like that to not do it anymore, because we have our set hypothesis which you can fill out. So we try to avoid it, but if it happens, it happens. But we don't filter it out.
Okay.
So we have a lot of internal trainings that will tell you about how to write a proper hypothesis.
Hi, I'm Nick. I'm from Plesk. Thank you for the great insights. So the question is, in my company we sometimes struggle with finding the best name for a thing, for some feature, so that people will understand it well, Google it well, and well, use it with less hassle. Did you ever try A/B testing with naming things?
Yeah.
And if yes, what was the result, and what kind of hypothesis did you use for it?
Okay, so we have a team of copywriters, and they also are allowed to run experiments. So if they think maybe reviews is not good, but customer experiences is better, then they try to run that as well and see what the results are. So say we have tested on a lot of things. We have tested it on our booking buttons. We have tested it on titles, and basically everything that is testable, we tested it almost. I don't know how we keep running with tests, but I'm not allowed to talk about which specific things gather which data because we have competitors. But yeah, our copy experiments tend to be very successful. Yeah.
In your speech, you say about tools that can help understand how long A/B test should be run.
Yeah.
So, for example, it says like 5 days, like short period.
Yeah.
So, you have two like options. One, like pink, big, I don't know how to say, like something very, very new. Mm-hmm. And the other one, it's more like classy, more than look like the same that you have in previous versions. So how you understand if people clicks the pink one, it's not because it's something so new. So they just interested in this because they use Booking before and they want to check these so new options.
Yep.
So it's some criteria that you need to run your experiment more longer than that tools say.
So if you want to run something, so basically, okay, let me think a bit. It happens. It happens that something is just working because it looks new. If you have a lot of returning visitors, like in Twitter or something, you have a lot of returning visitors. At Booking.com, we have less returning visitors. Most are just new visitors or visitors that come every 6 months or something. But if you have a lot of returning visitors, you might want to run it for a little while longer. It could be that your normal 5 days should be 2 weeks. So yeah, if you have a lot of returning visitors, try to, I don't know, duplicate it a little bit if you actually want to measure them. If you know my users come to visit once in a week, make sure that you do it every week. But also, if your initial change with your A/B test results into, well, a positive effect, and you think, well, it could be because it's new, then try to, after your experiment, try to change it again and see if the same results is happening. And again, so whenever, if you have to change it, if you change it a lot, and every time people are clicking more on it, try to change it a lot, basically.
Hi.
Hi.
You said that metrics should be tested. Is it correct?
Yes.
How do you do it?
Okay, so what you can do is use your metrics in experiments where you're not using it as your defined metric, but look at the data it generates. Look at what it's doing, but don't make your decisions based on that data. So just take a look at the metrics, and so say you want a new thing, click on a button. Try to look at other experiments that are on the same page and see if the button clicks change or not, and to see if it's working. So try to run it on different experiments and then do it on your own experiment.
Thank you.
Hi, Paul. My name is Ivan. Thank you very much for a talk. You guys run a lot of different experiments over different audiences, obviously, in different countries. If it's not NDA, can you share some? There are like two options about user interface, for example. One idea is that if we make a good user interface, it works for Chinese people as good as for, I don't know, people from Malaysia, from Siberia, or whatever. And there is another approach that says, well, you know, Japanese think that white is the color of death, and we got to change and tweak something. So, can you share some, I don't know, user experience or user, I don't know, interface features that you kind of found out to be interesting, various across the cultures?
Yeah, sure. We have some data public about that. So, for example, if you are in China and you go to the website, or maybe even if you change the language to Chinese, the website would look pretty different, because also in Japanese, because we have a lot of characters, like anime kind of characters on the website, because that kind of is good for that area. So yeah, we do change it. We try to make it as consistent across all languages as possible, so the development time is easier, and it's easier to experiment on a lot of different languages. But yeah, there are some things that you have to change, especially if you have different kind of languages. For Russian, we have to change a lot of things because the words or the sentences are just way longer than every other language. So we always test things in Russian, and sometimes have to make specific changes just for Russian.
Okay, we got time for one last question. Who's gonna be? Oh, really? Someone there? No? Okay. Let things be fair. You were first.
Thank you. My name is Yuri. I would like to ask, you make lots of experiments with user interface, and do you provide some possibilities for your customers, like hotels or apartments, to make their own experiments? Ooh.
No. We have thought about that. But yeah, we haven't started on creating that because we don't really know what will happen if we allow that. So it has to be very constricted.
That's gonna be the part we are clapping to thank Paul for the great talk.